Did you know that in Racine, Wisconsin, black residents are 12 times more likely to land in prison than white residents, and that a town in Arkansas is home to the modern-day KKK headquarters? Today, we will go over the 10 most racist cities in America. To determine which American cities are the most racist, we have examined personal experiences shared by many and analyzed the history, amount of hate crime, racial disparities, and economic statistics of each city. Remember though, not everyone in these cities is racist. The many good people just happen to have one too many racist neighbors. Number 10. Danville, Illinois. In the 1800s and the early 1900s, Danville was quite notorious for racially motivated riots and street fights that typically ended in the deaths of many. One of such incidents is the 1883 Danville riot. Fast forward to over 100 years later, and although the street fights have ended, racism is still present in Danville. Sometime in May 2022, a group of protesters displayed a White Lives Matter sign the same day a gunman allegedly fueled by racism shot 13 people in a supermarket situated in a predominantly black neighborhood. Aside from the full-blown public displays of racism and violence against people of color, Danville's census figures also tell a tale of racial discrimination. Danville has one of the widest gaps between white and black residents in terms of education, income, and health in all of Illinois. For example, while 75% of all white families in Danville are homeowners, only about 31% of black families own their homes. Also, while about 20% of Danville's white population live below the poverty line, nearly 50% of the city's black residents are below that line. If the figures don't mean much to you, maybe the personal experiences of others will. A person of color who visited Danville with their family had this to say on TripAdvisor about a local inn. "They stole my $150 deposit and told us our kind wasn't welcome. Very rude workers, very racist, and need to be shut down if you ask me. I will never stay at this location in Danville, Illinois again, and am going to file a lawsuit." Number 9. Rochester, New York. It is the 21st century, and from the Burning Man Festival to Louisiana Mudfests, party concepts are getting crazier with each passing second. The only kind of parties we didn't expect to exist are racist parties, but as it turns out, they are still around. In July 2022, a wealthy Rochester couple were accused of throwing a racist party, and this speaks volume about the alarming level of racism in the city. According to ACT Rochester's Hard Facts, the racial disparities in Rochester are deeper and broader than in New York and the U.S. as a whole. In Rochester, African American children are more than 4 times as likely as whites to be in poverty, and Latino children experience poverty at an alarming rate of more than 3.5 times that of white children. Furthermore, both African Americans and Latinos experience poverty at rates that are more than 3 times that of white residents. These alarming racial disparities also manifest in the life expectancy of residents. According to research from Rochester Area Community Foundation in Monroe County, your chances of dying before 65 are 46% if you are black, 52% if Latino, and only 26% if white. Needless to say, Rochester definitely earned its place on this list. Number 8. Fresno, California. Seeing how California is home to a total of 74 hate groups, making it the state with the most hate groups in all of America, it should not come as a surprise that one of its cities has earned a spot on this list. Being California's 5th largest city, Fresno is always in the spotlight, but for all the wrong reasons. Over the last 2 decades, more than 3/4 of the reported hate-driven crimes in Fresno County, 268 out of 355 incidents, have been perpetrated in Fresno, and the majority of these crimes were reportedly fueled by racism. For nearly as long as these hate-fueled crimes have persisted, people of color residing in Fresno have told the story of the racial divide in the city. To support this claim, Alan Autry, a former mayor of Fresno, used the term "a tale of 2 cities" when asked to describe the disparity in income, economic investments, property value, and quality of life between North Fresno, an area that is home to Fresno's white population, and South Fresno, the part of the city that is mainly populated by communities of color. Today, the census numbers show that only 13.76% of Fresno's white population are below the poverty line, as opposed to the 33.19% of the black population and 28.02% of the Hispanic. Number 7, Trenton, New Jersey. Trenton is the capital city of the U.S. state of New Jersey, and unfortunately, it is also the 7th most racist city in all of America. One of the many ways that racism rears its ugly head is racial profiling, and in March 2022, an unarmed black man, identified as Jajuan R. Henderson, became a victim of this racial injustice after being shot and paralyzed by officers from the Trenton Police Department while grabbing an iced tea from a car. Aside from racial profiling and police brutality, racism in Trenton manifests in the form of systematic racism in housing, employment, and healthcare. For example, during the pandemic, studies showed that Hispanic New Jerseyans were most likely to have contracted the virus, and Black New Jerseyans were more likely to have died or been hospitalized from the virus than other residents. According to experts, these disparities exist to this day because systematic racism is deeply rooted in nearly all institutions in Trenton. Number 6, Peoria, Illinois. From an assistant fire chief who gained negative attention for using a racial slur on camera, to the president of an indigenous insurance company who came under fire for making a racist post on Facebook about the Super Bowl halftime performance, it's safe to say that racism is at an all-time high in Peoria. As is common in most racist cities, there is clear divide between the white population of Peoria and residents of color, most of whom live in the South Side, a low-income neighborhood reserved for residents living below the poverty line. The median family income for Southside residents is less than half of the average resident's family income, and only 32.6% of Black residents own their homes, compared to 76.1% of white residents. The good news, however, is that Rita Ali, the present mayor of Peoria, has welcomed the activities of the Joint Commission on Racial Justice and Equity, an organization founded to promote racial justice and equity within the county and city governments. Hopefully soon, the efforts of the organization will begin to make significant progress in the right direction. Number 5, Racine, Wisconsin. What if we told you that in Racine and Wisconsin as a whole, Black residents are 12 times more likely to land in prison than white residents? Does this mean that white residents commit significantly fewer crimes? Probably not. According to experts, these deep disparities result from pervasive racial bias in the state's criminal justice system. If you thought the glaring racial disparities in Racine only affect the prison system, you could not be further from the truth, because even the high schoolers in this city are deeply effective. Nearly every year, students of color who attend the Racine Lutheran High School come forward to say that they have been harassed and dehumanized. But not much seems to have been done about it. On the aspect of numbers, things don't look good either, because census figures have shown that, on average, Black families make around $26,880, which is less than half of the $63,507, the average income of white families. That said, it's not hard to see why Racine is constantly ranked among the worst cities in the United States for people of color, especially African Americans, to live. Number 4, Naperville, Illinois. The fact that Illinois has 3 entries on this list makes you wonder what the hell is happening in that state. Well, a lot, as it turns out. In 2019, some Black patrons of the Naperville Buffalo Wild Wings were asked by an employee to move to a different table because a white patron felt uncomfortable sitting next to them. Barely a year later, in 2020, a woman called Naperville's Asian residents roving carpetbaggers during a council meeting. 2 years later, census figures prove that not much has changed where racism is concerned. For example, despite being a minority group in the city, the amount of Black people living below the poverty line in Naperville is almost 3 times the number of white residents below the line. In addition to this, research conducted by students of North Central College proves that Naperville is indeed a sundown town with policies in place to stifle businesses owned by people of color. Number 3, Milwaukee, Waukesha, West Allis, Wisconsin. Among the many ways to determine just how racist a city really is, the most efficient method is by asking the residents. With this in mind, Suffolk University conducted a survey of 500 residents of Milwaukee. When the results came in, it was discovered that while most white people voted excellent or good when asked to rate the city, 80% of black respondents rated the city fair or poor. It is also worthy of note that all of the survey's participants identified race relations as the second biggest issue plaguing the city. A deep dive into Milwaukee's history shows that it is the second most segregated city between black and white populations in all of America, further proving that racial relations in the metro area is indeed an issue that needs urgent attention. Having said that, it goes without saying that systematic and structural racism have deep roots in Milwaukee. In recent times, this racism has manifested in terms of maternal and infant mortality, educational levels, disabilities, and unemployment. You might think twice before entering Milwaukee, especially if you are a person of color. Number 2, Harrison, Arkansas. Previously known as a sundown town, where black Americans faced the threat of death if they were outside after dusk, depending on whom you ask, Harrison is either the most racist city in America or the second most racist city. And frankly speaking, between the race riots of the early 1900s and the influx of several white supremacist organizations during the late 20th and early 21st centuries, it is easy to see why the city has earned such an unsettling reputation. Not to mention the modern-day Ku Klux Klan is headquartered in Zinc, which is just a short 20-minute drive from Harrison. Although the year is 2022, a trip to Harrison would certainly give you a feel of 1844 because, according to census figures, 94.13% of Harrison's residents are white, and of the 8 black people living in Harrison, nearly 100% live below the poverty line. The numbers don't look good for other people of color either because, despite being minority groups in the city, they are more likely to live below the poverty line and less likely to be employed. Also, if you ever visit the town of Harrison, brace yourself for the not-so-warm welcome you would receive from the controversial billboards that read, "White Pride Radio," and "anti-racist" is a code word for anti-white. On the bright side, it's worthy of a note that Harrison's government and well-meaning citizens have been cooperating with Harrison Community Task Force on Race Relations, an organization set up in an attempt to reform the city's racist history. Number 1. Waterloo, Cedar Falls, Iowa. In 2018, a study carried out by 24/7 Wall Street, taking into account gaps in income, unemployment, and home ownership along racial divides, ranked the worst cities for Black Americans to live. The Iowan city of Waterloo emerged at the top. According to the published results, no U.S. metro area has larger social and economic disparities along racial lines than Waterloo, Cedars Falls, Iowa. Going by the statistics cited by the report, the black unemployment rate in Waterloo is over 5 times the white unemployment rate. Furthermore, while 73.2% of white residents own their homes in Waterloo, only 32.8% of black residents can say the same. Although some sources have come forward to dispute these numbers, claiming that the gap is no longer as wide, one thing is certain: the racial disparity in the city of Waterloo remains a cause for concern. To this day, racism still plagues the city of Waterloo. In 2021, an incident involving derogatory terms being used on Waterloo East High School girls basketball players during a game confirmed that racial bias has rooted itself in the school system. But what about America's most dangerous cities? Check out the video we made on that topic right here. Who knows? Your city could be on the list.